I am tan and shiny in this light. Hello, my name is Sophie. Welcome or welcome back. I'm starting another vlog. I'm starting one on a Friday. Usually I start them on Mondays and I do a week, but I'm just kind of keeping things fresh. I'm also spitting on myself. I just got back from France the day before yesterday. I'm quite jet lagged and I'm going to leave in about half an hour to go on my next adventure. I'm going for a weekend in the north of New York State, in the forest, not forest necessarily, nature. Actually, I don't know how foresty it is, for a really short artist residency retreat. And I'm going to do some writing on a project I've alluded to. I'm not going to get into it, certainly not right now, but I'm going to do some writing in nature. Yeah, that's the theory for the next few days. I'm bringing a couple books with me because of course I am. One of them is Elvia Wilk. What is this called again? Death by Landscape. Wow. This was one of my favorite books last year, and I think it will be very useful for me and what I'm writing about. So I plan to dip back into these essays. I'm also bringing The Besieged City by Clarice Lispector. This is on my project of books to read this summer. I'm going to be reading it with Nathan. I don't know if I'm actually going to read this weekend, but Lispector is also very much a type of writing and a type of thinking that gets me thinking and writing, and I think will specifically help me in this project. A couple of her other books have definitely been fodder, kind of cosmic fodder for this project specifically. So I don't know about The Besieged City, but we'll see. So yeah, I plan to vlog about kind of my writing experience, my reading experience. We'll see how much I get done. Bibliosophie. Her face is now appearing. I'm gonna be real honest. I am freaked out by the sounds coming from outside of my tent. So I started The Besieged City yesterday and read a little bit this morning. I'm 2 and some chapters in, so I don't really have too many thoughts yet. There's already a lot of interesting, intriguing, beautiful, weird sentences, of course, happening. We're following a girl, young woman, kind of in that cusp area, who is quite devoid of an inner life. This is a theme that Lispector also explores in The Hour of the Star. And there's already this theme emerging of the kind of the superficial, the willfully superficial. She is perhaps kind of making herself into an object with adornment. I have a note in the margins of what actually is adornment. Does it change the thing itself? Is it a decoration? Meanwhile, the Besieged City seems to be an actual city that is developing. It's mechanizing and, progressing. This takes place in 1920, unspecified. And so we're seeing kind of this city grow and develop also. So there's personal development and infrastructural development and how they kind of overlap. Another character who's getting some specific time is Masud, who is, I think, the citizen of the second chapter, called The Citizen. Heroic and empty, the citizen remains standing beside the open window. I like heroic and empty. I'm intrigued by Lispector's use of Greek mythological heroes, because here we've got a Perseus, and she has several Ulysses floating around in her other works. I don't know if it's just a Brazilian name thing. Maybe a lot of people are named, or especially at this time were named for Greek myths, or if it's just a Lispector ism, let me know. And meanwhile, I've also been writing quite a lot, so trying to get myself to do some more writing right now, but I'm in an afternoon slump. I'm copying out some poems and explicating them and kind of writing some thoughts, some kind of personal thoughts about them, trying to mush it all together. We'll see. I think that is a chipmunk. Hello, chipmunk. Just exploring with their really short oars.
Exploring.
Hello from my office in the forest. You're currently being propped up by a mossy tree, as you can tell from this side of the screen. So we'll see about that. It's a very, very professional enterprise I've got going. I've been reading some more Besieged City, slowly, and I have some thoughts. I wrote down some thoughts about seeing specifically, which is ironic because right now I'm actually having a hard time seeing. I think I'm getting a little bit of an ocular migraine from too much caffeine and I think low blood sugar, but you don't need to know that. Do you want to hear my thoughts about Besieged City and seeing specifically? Of course you do. Let me see if I can read my handwriting. Seeing. What is it to see? When is it an act of objectification and when is it one of digging? Between Lucrezia, the girl, the woman protagonist, and Felipe, a man she kind of goes out with, quote, and just as the girl had never truly looked at him, afraid to muddy such a clear surface, he too almost hadn't looked at her because he didn't know her. Later, each would forget the other's useless features. End quote. Each one of them makes a conscious or unconscious decision not to look at the other beyond a superficial carapace. The decision of that seeing, or rather unseeing, flattens the object, and indeed makes each into an object. In Lucrezia, there's also a purposeful self-objectification through superficiality. Quote, she suddenly leaned toward the mirror and sought the loveliest way to see herself, opened her mouth, looked at her teeth, closed it. Soon, from her fixed gaze, was emerging at last the way of not penetrating too much and of looking with slight effort only at the surface, and quickly no longer looking. But in fact, her superficiality was a severe stripping down, and when she was ready, she'd look like an object of São Geraldo. Unquote. What about objects and things? Quote, she needed countless things. The girl didn't have any imagination, but a watchful reality of things that was making her almost sleepwalk. She was needing things in order for them to exist. End quote. Does she have some kind of agency over objects if her desire of them allows for or confirms their existence in some way? But at the same time, as they form the unimaginative bulwark of her reality, she's dependent on them to operate or even exist to some degree. She maps herself around things, including people things. In the same way, she is a person thing and is needful of others to confirm her existence. Spirituality and belief, and especially organized belief, have an interesting perpendicular role. There's superficiality and profundity in them. There's performance to them and display. Quote, even spiritist centers were starting to form diffidently in the Catholic township, and Lucrezia herself made up that she'd sometimes hear a voice. But in fact, it would be easier for her to see the supernatural. Touching reality is what would make her fingers tremble. End quote. And finally, what of display? Quote, when Sao Geraldo would appear, it would appear identical to itself, without revealing itself, end quote. So putting on a display, and to some extent adornment, is a recursive action of hiding while in view. I'm starting to get more and more into the book. I think it's more plotty than certainly some other Lispector book, certainly more than A Breath of Life, for instance. It's kind of a girl meets boy situation. Girl, small town girl evolves, or it's starting to become that, and I know a little bit about the plot from having read the synopsis. Excuse me. We'll see. It's evolving. I have not at all been reading Elvia Wilk. I have been reading, or was reading, Noreen Masud, A Flat Place. I read a good chunk of that actually on my way up here in the car, which shocked me because usually I get quite car sick. But I read the first 2 sections of that and I'm really, really enjoying it, actually. It's about space and landscape and complex PTSD and memory, and it's it's very beautifully written and kind of a mystery investigation in some ways of the author's own kind of complex past, and of various landscapes around her. I really like, actually, because I happened to have written it down, I wrote down several quotations from it, but I'll read just one for now, which I liked. A flat landscape simply is, with an intensity which excludes you as you stand and gaze. And that strikes me actually as having a nice partnership with all of these seeing and gazing and being thoughts that I'm having with the Besieged City. All right, I leave you here. Didn't get very much writing done today, but instead kind of realized that maybe I'm done with collecting a bunch of pieces of writing and I just need to build the thing itself, which is terrifying. I'm back in New York. I didn't really film anything of Monday, of my last day, in the woods. Sorry about that. And then I traveled back to New York and kind of slammed back into work and social things. I'm crashing. I think it's a little too much to have put my body through to fly from France, have jet lag, immediately go camping for the first time, by the way. I'm not a camper. And it was not heavy duty camping, but still. And just concentrate on a bunch of stuff all at once. So it was great, but also I've been flattened in many ways. I finished A Flat Place, speaking of flat things, earlier this morning and really enjoyed it overall. It has shades of Olivia Lang because the author Masud is exploring different flat places in Britain. So to me, that kind of reminded me of Lang's various projects of talking about physical places and history as well as their personal history, but A Flat Place also has a lot more, I think, personal history, and of course is not written by a white author and deals a lot more with aspects of race and kind of racial politics as well. And yeah, overall, I found it very compelling, very interesting. I think I found myself wanting to do exactly what the author has set out not to do and said would not happen, which is to kind of unlock the mystery of her childhood and of her complex trauma. I think we can't help it, potentially. We want the kind of detective story. So I found myself really, really digging into the parts of the story of her childhood in Pakistan that she was giving us for just kind of wanting more. Ooh, what's coming next? And that's absolutely opposite of the point. Because I just finished Malina last week, and that's also a book that deals so much with trauma, both personal and generational and general. I definitely found a lot of parallels between the texts in terms of a trauma that is more than personal, more than individual. For instance, in A Flat Place, I have some aids with me. In A Flat Place, Noreen Masud says, "What happened to me didn't happen to me. I just lived in its terrible air." And the specifics of that are different than in Malina, but it did definitely remind me of part of the trauma that Malina's narrator is carrying, which is a kind of generational inherited trauma, the inheritance of the horrors of Nazism and the guilt and complicity of that. And then otherwise, in a more general and also even general and specific trauma as part of narrative, which is such a huge component of both A Flat Place and Malina. In A Flat Place, Masud says, supposedly trauma transcends language and time and is therefore untellable. And I think that Malina is in part really the exercise of trying to write those feelings, of trying to put into words things that are untellable. I think Malina has many projects and is many things. If you've been following along with my Substack reading notes, there are just a lot of things to dig into there, but definitely the impact of narrative trauma words is such a convoluted knot. And I mentioned this particular quotation in my last batch of notes. "I will tell you a terrible secret. Language is punishment. Language must encompass all things, and in it all things must again transpire according to guilt and the degree of guilt." And that definitely struck me. That has so many shades of Wittgenstein, and it's so appropriate to the project of narrative, the project of naming trauma, etc., etc., and I think really works in the case of both books. Speaking of reading notes, I think a last batch will come out in a couple of days, she said optimistically. As of right now, as of recording this, I just sent out my August pick for book club, which will be various versions of Antigone, both the Sophocles play, but also the Jean Anouilh version of the play and the Anne Carson translation, and also any number of versions that you want to add to it. So I'm going to be thinking about Antigone. Antigone August is what I'm calling it, in wonderful branding. One last note on trauma. What I really like at the end of A Flat Place is a note about words, in fact, and she mentions the difficulty also of the trickiness around trauma, or one of the trickinesses, which is what is the use or the misuse of naming things trauma. It's, for many good reasons, it can be a little bit of a tricky thing to call an experience trauma, whether that's complex or not, to refer to PTSD or CPTSD. It is a very white Western sort of vision of the world. It's a very individualistic rather than collectivist vision. So I liked her grappling with using that term or not, what that also has to do, with narrative. No, overall, I'm really glad I read that book. I am going to try to write out, or rather to transfer the things which I've written in the past few days to computer, to type, if you will. Wow. I'm firing on many cylinders. I have a lot of passages, full sentences written out in here from the weekend, as well as various notes, and then also just whole chunks of passages. I think I said this in an earlier clip, but yeah, I think I have most of the writing that I want for this project, and now I need to splice it all together, edit it into the music. I haven't gone into what this project is, and I, again, kind of still won't, but it involves both text and music in a kind of symbiotic relationship ideally, but that's gonna actually involve quite a lot of architectural work. So, but first I want to transfer over kind of all of my writing, have it all in one place, flesh out the things that need to be fleshed out, but mostly a lot of things are kind of fleshed. I write a lot in full sentences, and you know, I just do some editing when I transfer over into typed versions. I find that composing by hand writing is just a lot better for me. It's a lot more creative. When later on I've done a fair amount of the work, or I've kind of gotten a project started. So for instance, my dissertation, I'm not writing everything by hand, but I did write initial ideas and initial paragraphs really, or initial analyses by hand. I find that I lock up a lot more if I'm on the computer. I didn't invent this theory. George Saunders writes about it, and countless other people have talked about this. You're just a lot more creative when you do things by hand, and that's certainly my case. I think I also get more distracted if I'm on my computer, of course. There are all sorts of logiciels, apps, softwares you can use to, you know, focus yourself, make the internet unusable for X amount of time, etc., etc. But you know what also works super well is sitting down at a table or on the ground with a pen and paper and writing just obsessively. It forces me to look forward rather than kind of constantly editing myself. So I find that it's a much more generative process. However, now that generation is going to be put into nice font. Voila! I think I'm going to close out the vlog on those thoughts. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Ciao!